For decades, empaths have been written off. The sensitive ones, the feelers, the people who seem too soft for this world. Society cast them as side characters in a story they never controlled. Victims in a narrative written by narcissists and manipulators who needed someone to absorb their darkness. But Carl Jung saw something different. He predicted a shift, a psychological comeback, where the most sensitive would become the most powerful, where the people dismissed as weak would emerge as unstoppable. This era is ending. The empath is waking up, and what comes next will rewrite everything you thought you knew about power. This comeback is not about revenge. It is about rewriting reality itself. And when an empath learns to wield their gift consciously, they become the most dangerous force in any room. Not dangerous to the innocent. Dangerous to those who built their power on lies. Dangerous to those who weaponized kindness. Dangerous to those who mistook silence for stupidity. The awakened empath sees everything, remembers everything, and finally speaks everything. But here is what makes this comeback so terrifying. Empaths were never weak. They were studying every betrayal, every manipulation, every lie told to their face while they smiled and absorbed the pain. They kept notes, mental records of triggers, insecurities, and patterns. They mapped the psychological landscape of everyone around them with surgical precision. They learned which words landed hardest, which silences cut deepest, which tactics were deployed when someone felt threatened. They catalogued every inconsistency, every contradiction between words and actions, every micro-expression that revealed the truth beneath the performance. And they never used any of it. They stored this information in silence. Not out of weakness, out of hope that people would change, out of a belief that kindness could heal, out of a desire to see the best in everyone, until something pushed them past their breaking point, until the evidence became undeniable, until staying silent became more painful than speaking truth. Jung called this the incubation period. The world saw victims. He saw weapons being forged in silence. He saw psychological genius hidden beneath a mask of gentleness. He understood that the person absorbing everyone's pain was also absorbing everyone's secrets, and that knowledge would one day become power. For years, empaths heard the same script. Too sensitive, too emotional, too much. They were treated as emotional dumpsters for narcissists and broken family systems. The shock absorbers who kept dysfunction running smoothly. They absorbed rage from alcoholic parents, infidelity from spouses, chaos from every direction. And they were told their pain was their problem, that they needed thicker skin, that they needed to toughen up, that their feelings were an inconvenience to everyone around them. The gaslighting was constant. When they named dysfunction, they were called dramatic. When they set boundaries, they were called selfish. When they expressed hurt, they were accused of being manipulative. The narrative was always the same. The empath was the problem. Never the person causing the pain, always the person feeling it. This created a psychological trap. Empaths learned to doubt their own perceptions, to question their own reality, to wonder if maybe they really were too sensitive, too much, too broken to function in a normal world. They internalized the shame that belonged to their abusers. They carried guilt for crimes they did not commit. They apologized for taking up space in a world that needed their gifts. But suppression is not the same as elimination. Every emotion they swallowed did not disappear. It accumulated. Every truth they silenced did not vanish. It took root. Every boundary they failed to set did not get forgotten. It got remembered. And Jung understood what most people missed. This was not weakness. This was an incubation period. Pressure building, data collecting, power waiting for the right moment to emerge. The empath was not breaking down during those years of silence. They were taking notes, every micro-expression, every lie, every moment someone showed their true face and thought the empath did not notice. They noticed everything, they just chose to say nothing. Until the day they chose differently. And that day always comes. Jung documented a concept he called Enantiodromia, the moment when a force flips into its opposite, when pressure reaches a breaking point and transforms into something new. For empaths, this moment arrives through profound betrayal, not just any betrayal, the kind that forces them to choose between remaining a victim or becoming sovereign. And when an empath makes that choice, everything changes. The moment of the snap is not dramatic. There is no screaming, no rage, no chaos. Instead, something far more unsettling happens. The empath becomes unnaturally calm. Their voice drops. Their eyes change. The frantic energy of trying to be understood disappears completely. They stop explaining, stop defending, stop seeking validation from people who will never give it. They simply stop playing the game entirely. And this calm is what terrifies people, because manipulators know how to handle anger. Empaths aren't broken, they're alchemists in progress. The Alchemist's Path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook, in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com. They know how to deflect tears. They know how to weaponize apologies. But they have no defense against someone who simply sees them clearly and no longer cares about their approval. This is the psychological shift that changes everything. The empath stops absorbing and starts mirroring. And for the first time, they speak the truth they have been holding for years, not with emotion, not with drama. With the clinical precision of someone presenting evidence in a courtroom. They describe patterns, they note inconsistencies, they highlight the gap between words and actions. They speak about abuse as if they are documenting it for historical record. Because in a way they are. This is the turning point. The manipulators expect emotional chaos. They prepare for tears, apologies, and the usual cycle of abuse. What they get instead is clinical precision. The empath begins to reveal everything they observed, catalogued, and silently endured. Not with cruelty, with accuracy, not with revenge, with receipts. They name the patterns, they expose the lies, they dismantle the false reality piece by piece. Using the very information the abuser thought was hidden, and they do it without emotion. Just facts, just truth, just the mirror finally being turned around. Jung called this the most chilling psychological transformation he ever witnessed, because the empath is not attacking. They are simply showing what was always there. And for people who built their lives on deception, being truly seen is unbearable. This is where shadow integration begins. The empath finally accepts the parts of themselves society taught them to hide. Their intelligence, their strength, their capacity for boundaries, their right to say no, their ability to be ruthless when necessary, their permission to prioritize themselves. All the qualities they suppress to keep others comfortable now become integrated into their conscious identity. Shadow integration is not about becoming cruel. It is about becoming complete. It is about acknowledging that compassion without boundaries is self-destruction. That kindness without discernment is enabling. That empathy without self-protection is a recipe for psychological annihilation. The empath who integrates their shadow does not lose their capacity for compassion. They gain the wisdom to choose where that compassion flows. And this choice is everything, because the old version gave compassion to everyone. The awakened version gives it only to those who honor it. The old version absorbed pain indiscriminately. The new version deflects toxicity automatically. The old version needed to be liked. The new version needs to be respected. And if respect is not available, distance is the only acceptable alternative. This creates what Jung called the integrated personality, someone who can access both their light and their shadow consciously, someone who can be incredibly gentle with those who deserve it and absolutely ruthless with those who do not. Someone who refuses to choose between being kind and being strong because they understand these qualities are not opposites. They are partners. They become selectively empathetic, still deeply caring, but strategically protective. They scan every environment for psychological safety before opening up. They test people's capacity to hold space before offering vulnerability. They watch how others treat boundaries before lowering their own. They observe patterns over time instead of believing promises in the moment. And this is what makes them psychologically invincible. The awakened empath develops a gift that manipulators fear more than anything. They can see through deception instantly. Their pattern recognition is so refined that they detect manipulation before it fully forms. Gaslighting no longer works. Guilt trips bounce off. Emotional blackmail fails completely. This is not because they became cold. It is because they became conscious, and consciousness is the only true immunity to psychological abuse. When an empath speaks truth now, they do not argue, they dismantle. They present observations with such clarity that denial becomes impossible. They name the game being played. They expose the strategy being used. They show the pattern repeating, and they do it all without needing the other person to admit anything. Because the awakened empath has learned the most liberating truth of all. They do not need validation from the people they are exposing. They trust their own perceptions completely, and that self-trust is what makes them unstoppable. The power dynamics shift entirely. Manipulators rely on the empath's silence, on their need to be liked, on their fear of conflict, on their tendency to doubt themselves, on their belief that everyone deserves another chance. The comeback breaks all of that. The empath who has integrated their shadow is not afraid anymore. Not of judgment, not of abandonment, not of being called too much or too sensitive, not of being alone, because they have learned that being alone is infinitely better than being with people who require you to betray yourself for access. This shift in power is not subtle. The empath who once apologized for existing now speaks truth without permission. The empath who once absorbed everyone's emotions now reflects them back with mirror-like precision. The empath who once prioritized everyone else now protects their own energy first. And the people who benefited from the old dynamic experience this as a betrayal, because in their minds, the empath changing the rules is the real problem, never the fact that the rules were designed to exploit them in the first place. But the awakened empath sees this reaction for exactly what it is: confirmation. When you stop accepting dysfunction and people get angry, you have your answer about what they valued in the relationship. It was never you. It was what you provided. It was the service, the absorption, the convenience of having someone who would tolerate anything. They know exactly who they are, and that knowledge creates a psychological fortress that no manipulation can penetrate. Self-knowledge is the only real immunity to psychological warfare. You cannot gaslight someone who trusts their own perceptions. You cannot trip someone who knows their worth. You cannot manipulate someone who is willing to walk away, and the awakened empath possesses all three. This transformation is happening on a massive scale right now. We live in an era saturated with falseness and narcissism. Social media rewards performance over authenticity. Corporate culture demands productivity over humanity. Relationships are reduced to transactions. Everyone is selling something. Everyone is performing something. And the gap between who people pretend to be and who they actually are has never been wider. The collective shadow of society has grown so large that it can no longer be ignored. The systems built on exploitation are collapsing under their own weight. The facades are cracking, the lies are becoming obvious, and empaths are waking up everywhere, not individually, collectively, like a distributed immune response, activating across the entire social body. Jung believed that when collective consciousness reaches a breaking point, individuals who can see clearly become essential for evolution. Empaths are that evolutionary response. They are the immune system of a sick society. They sense the disease before symptoms appear. They feel the dysfunction before it becomes obvious. They recognize patterns that others dismiss as coincidence, and now they are speaking up. Now they are refusing to participate. Now they are building alternatives. The era of the empath is not a metaphor. It is a psychological shift happening in real time. Empaths are rising to positions of leadership, not through force, but through necessity. Because in a world drowning in lies, the people who can see truth become invaluable. In a culture of performance, the people who value authenticity become magnetic. In systems designed for exploitation, the people who refuse to participate become revolutionary. Organizations led by awakened empaths function differently. They do not tolerate toxic behavior. They do not reward manipulation. They do not sacrifice humanity for profit. These empaths build systems based on authenticity because they can no longer participate in anything else, and the old guard cannot compete. Manipulators experience massive cognitive dissonance when confronted with an awakened empath. Their tactics do not work anymore. The psychological games that controlled others for years suddenly fail, and they cannot understand why. The awakened empath is playing a different game entirely, one based on truth instead of control, and truth always wins in the long run. Here is what makes this comeback permanent. Once an empath sees clearly, they cannot unsee. Once they trust their perceptions, they cannot be gaslit. Once they integrate their shadow, they cannot be manipulated. The transformation is irreversible. You cannot go back to sleep once you are fully awake. You cannot unknow what you have learned. You cannot unfeel what you have felt. This permanence is both liberating and lonely. Liberating because you are finally free from the prison of other people's lies. Lonely because you can no longer connect with people operating at lower levels of consciousness. The small talk feels suffocating. The performance feels transparent. The manipulation feels obvious and exhausting to witness. You start to realize how rare authentic connection actually is. How most of what passes for relationship is actually just mutual use. But the loneliness is temporary, because awakened empaths recognize each other instantly. There is a quality of presence that cannot be faked, a depth of seeing that needs no explanation, a level of honesty that feels like coming home. These connections are rare, but they are real, and one authentic connection is worth more than 1,000 superficial ones. This is the final state of the rewritten story. The empath is no longer a participant in other people's dramas. They are the author of their own. They choose their relationships consciously. They set boundaries ruthlessly. They protect their energy fiercely. And they refuse to dim their light for anyone's comfort. Not out of arrogance, out of self-respect, out of hard-won wisdom about what happens when you betray yourself to keep others comfortable. The comeback reaches its climax when the empath realizes something profound. They were never broken. Society was broken. They were never too sensitive. The world was too numb. They were never the problem. They were the solution waiting to be activated. Their sensitivity was not a flaw to fix. It was a feature to protect. And the most dangerous thing for the old world is an individual who cannot be lied to. Someone who sees through every facade. Someone who trusts themselves completely. Someone who refuses to play games they did not consent to. Someone who would rather be alone than pretend. Someone who knows their worth and refuses all discounts. This is the awakened empath. And this is why their comeback rewrites everything. Because systems built on lies cannot survive contact with people committed to truth. Relationships built on exploitation cannot survive contact with people who value themselves. Hierarchies built on intimidation cannot survive contact with people who are no longer afraid. The awakened empath does not need to fight these systems. They simply stop participating, and their withdrawal reveals the house of cards for what it always was. Fragile, unsustainable, dependent on the compliance of people who finally woke up and said no. The rewrite is the ultimate freedom. It is the moment when the empath stops living according to scripts written by others and starts authoring their own story. They choose who gets access to their energy. They decide which battles deserve their attention. They create boundaries that protect their gift instead of depleting it. They say yes only when it aligns with their truth. They say no without explanation or apology. This freedom feels disorienting at first, because empaths spent so long being controlled by other people's needs that having their own needs feel almost selfish. They spent so long reading rooms and adjusting themselves that being themselves without modification feels vulnerable. They spent so long proving their worth that simply existing without justification feels revolutionary. But this disorientation passes, and what remains is clarity. The empath who has rewritten their story knows exactly what they want, exactly what they will tolerate, exactly what they bring to any relationship, and exactly what they require in return. This clarity is magnetic. It attracts authentic people and repels toxic ones. It creates a natural filter that protects without effort. This is not isolation. This is sovereignty. The awakened empath engages with the world more fully than ever before. But they engage on their terms, with clarity, with purpose, with complete awareness of what they are bringing to every interaction. They show up fully when it is safe. They withdraw completely when it is not, and they no longer apologize for either choice. And this conscious engagement is what changes everything. Because empaths who know their worth do not settle for dysfunction. They do not enable abuse. They do not participate in systems that demand their silence. They build new systems instead, healthier ones, authentic ones, systems that honor sensitivity as strength instead of punishing it as weakness. If you feel this shift happening inside you, know this: you are not going crazy. You are evolving. The discomfort you feel is not a breakdown. It is a breakthrough. Your sensitivity was never your curse. It was your superpower, waiting for you to claim it. The people who told you that you were too much were actually saying you were too much for them to control. And that is not your problem to solve. The old story told you that empaths must sacrifice themselves to be valuable. That story was a lie designed to keep you controllable, designed to keep you small, designed to keep you serving systems that were never designed to serve you. The new story you are writing says something different. It says empaths who protect themselves become powerful. It says boundaries are not selfish. It says no is a complete sentence. It says your needs matter as much as anyone else's. And most importantly, it says you are always enough. You do not need to change who you are. You need to stop hiding it. You do not need to become someone else. You need to become more fully yourself. You do not need to earn your worth. You need to remember it was always yours. The rewrite happens when you finally accept that your perception of reality is valid, when you stop doubting what you see and start trusting what you know, when you integrate every part of yourself that you were taught to suppress. Your anger, your strength, your right to take up space, your capacity for ruthless honesty. These are not qualities that make you less empathetic. They make you completely empathetic. Because true empathy requires boundaries. Real compassion includes self-protection. Authentic love starts with loving yourself enough to say no to what harms you. This is the comeback Jung predicted. Not empaths becoming like their abusers. Empaths becoming fully themselves. And that wholeness is what makes them unstoppable. The era of the empath comeback is here. You can feel it in the air, in the way toxic people suddenly fear losing control, in the way authentic people find each other more easily, in the way old systems crumble while new ones emerge, in the way truth is becoming harder to suppress, in the way manipulation is becoming easier to spot, in the way people are choosing themselves over systems that never chose them. This is not happening to you. This is happening through you. You are part of a collective awakening, a psychological shift that rewrites not just individual stories, but the entire cultural narrative about sensitivity and power, about strength and weakness, about who gets to define normal and who gets labeled as broken. Empaths are reclaiming their rightful place, not as victims, not as martyrs, not as side characters in other people's stories, but as the powerful, conscious, sovereign beings they always were. The world needs this comeback. It needs people who cannot be bought, who will not lie, who refuse to participate in dysfunction, who build alternatives instead of complaining about problems, who protect truth instead of protecting comfort. It needs empaths who have integrated their shadow and learned to wield their gifts consciously, who can feel everything and choose wisely, who can see everyone and trust selectively, who can love deeply and protect fiercely. And if you are reading this, feeling the truth of these words resonating in your bones, then you are one of them. You are part of the comeback, part of the rewrite, part of the shift that changes everything. Your awakening is not an accident. Your sensitivity is not a mistake. Your perception is not a curse. You are exactly what this moment in history requires. Your sensitivity is not your weakness. It is your weapon. Your empathy is not your burden. It is your power. Your ability to feel everything is not your flaw. It is your gift. And the day you fully accept this is the day you step into the role you were always meant to play. The day you stop apologizing for your existence. The day you stop shrinking to fit spaces that were never designed for your expansion. The day you stop betraying yourself to keep others comfortable, not as the side character in someone else's story, but as the author of your own, not as the victim waiting to be saved, but as the hero who saves themselves, not as the empath who absorbs everything, but as the empath who chooses everything, the empath who sees clearly, speaks truthfully, loves selectively, protects fiercely, and refuses all compromise when it comes to their fundamental dignity. The empath comeback is not coming. It is here. It is happening right now, in you, through you, as you, and nothing will ever be the same. In the alchemist's path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get the Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.